like that.
No.
No go?
Need this?
It's all good. It's all good. I'm fine.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Okay, Mr. Clerk, the time is 7 p.m., May 3rd, 2016, so I'd like to call the General Committee meeting to order. Declaration of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, please? All right. That said, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as amended with the additions? Okay, moved by Councillor Tom, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Questions or comments on the agenda? Okay, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries.
Determination.
Okay, so we'll go with the determination of items requiring separate discussion. So I'll start with my left, Councillor Peary.
I am okay tonight.
Okay. Mayor Dahl.
Item 9, please.
Councillor Tom.
Item 10, please.
Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Abel.
I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Thompson.
Item 8, please.
Councillor Gardner.
5, 7, 9, and 12.
Okay, so 9 was pulled.
Sorry, wait a minute. 5, sorry, 6, and 12.
Okay, and Councillor Maracus.
No, not 7, thank you. No, you want it?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we'll confirm the items that have been pulled. So that's item 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12. Okay, so
What about 21? Is 21 just for information?
Councillor Thompson?
I don't believe Councillor Gardner wanted item 7 pulled.
No, you don't want 7? Okay.
She can clarify.
No, I don't want item 7 pulled, thank you. I did want to know, item 21, do we need to pull that?
Mr. Clerk, do we need item 21?
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, no, there is no specific direction required. This is related to the milestones that you're aware of. This is fairly, it's to be received for information, but also the nominal issue, just so it can start working through the process.
Thank you. Then may I ask when we're going to discuss the report through you, Mr. Chair, to, I don't know, Mr. CEO?
Mr. CEO?
Thank you. I've answered my own question. Thank you.
So I'll just repeat again. So items pulled for separate discussion was items 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 12. Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the items not requiring separate discussion. Okay, moved by Councillor Peary and seconded by Councillor Maracus. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, so we have one delegation this evening. Delegation A is Ms. Kristen Lyons and Stuart Brindle. Are they here?
You might tell them that their item did pass on consent.
Okay. And just for your information, your item did pass on consent.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, great. So please state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's Kristen Lyons, and I'm at Magna Golf Club Event Manager, 14780 Leslie Street, Aurora, Ontario, L4G7C3. We're proposing to have a firework display for our 15th anniversary party that's coming up on Thursday, June 23rd at approximately 10 p.m. We've hired Firemaster Productions, a professional fireworks company, to come in and produce a 7-minute show for our membership. Thanks. For sure.
Okay, great. Motion to receive? Okay, Councillor Marakis, Councillor Abel. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Councillor Marakis?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. That's great. Is council going to get an invite?
Sure, absolutely, not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Of receipt. Okay. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Do any of the advisory committee chairs have a presentation tonight? No? Okay, great. Okay, so we'll go with the items requiring separate discussion. Are there anyone of the members of the audience? Yes, 12?
So we need a motion. He's moving to 34.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, Councillor Abel? Okay. Okay. All that, we call votes, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, so we'll go to item 12, and that was pulled by Councillor Gardner.
I can't move it if somebody else
Can't move
would.
it? Will anyone else? Okay, Councillor Peary, second, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Last council meeting, we were talking about the subdivision adjoining this land. This land is in Block F. I think it's called Coots Block F. Thank you. And so this is an industrial designated area. We heard last week that the subdivision adjoining it was able to achieve the 2 units per acre and be in compliance with the Oak Ridge's, the OPA 34. But one of the reasons that it was able to be in compliance so this is very important to me, so I would appreciate everybody trying to listen. This is Block F. Block F is comprised of a large subdivision, and we approved a zoning change on that last week. Part of Block F is also this industrial package that we're talking about, sorry, the institutional package that we're talking about tonight. Thanks, Paul. And the reason that the subdivision adjoining it was able to achieve 2 units per acre, which was the requirement under OPA 34, is because they used this area, they calculated this area into the subdivision area and used it, and therefore there was a density transfer. And that makes sense because it was meant for a park or a school. And of course, a park or a school doesn't need any residential calculation. But now we have an application before us that it's asking for 250 units. And the way it is now, it doesn't need any residential density calculation. But if it is changed to the new use, I believe that it will need density calculation, and we don't have any to give it. It has 0 at the moment. So that is my concern.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Anyone else? Councillor Peary.
I don't want to draw Mr. Ramuno into the debate, but could I get Mr. Ramuno to clarify the situation? Because it was my understanding that this type of use was always contemplated on the site. Way back when we started out, and then later on it was brought forward that they were looking to some extent to do some more affordable uses for individuals as well, and I thought that was an important factor of this, because not all seniors can afford to go into a big glitzy retirement residence. This residence really was for everyone who needed a facility. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Ramuno, perhaps you could add a little bit of clarity to the situation.
Mr. Rumino.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, when we dealt with the Coots subdivision back in 2013, this institutional block was part of that original draft plan of subdivision, and the official plan identified this area as a home of a future potential future elementary school, but the underlying designation is for cluster residential. When we considered the application back in 2013 by council, we recognized that this was still going to be an institutional block, and the 195 units, residential units, were elsewhere. So similar to the zoning last week for the Brookfield to implement the first phase of those 42 units, this report is to get council to deal with the zoning for this specific institutional block. Again, that was contemplated back in 2013. There will be the need for a site plan approval for a future retirement home and long-term care facility that would be presented to council, but we're implementing the zoning bylaw at this stage. With respect to the units, these retirement homes, they're referred to as two, in this instance, the zoning would permit institutional use for a retirement home up to 250 units, but retirement home units aren't considered full dwelling units because it's a facility that those units may have individual washrooms, but they do not have individual kitchens. So under our definition and the regional definition, they're not considered dwelling units, and they don't require servicing allocation. But again, the official plan always contemplated this area for institutional type uses, and the underlying designation was for residential. So, they have achieved their 195 maximum units under the official plan, but the institutional is a permitted use above the 195 dwelling units.
And just to clarify further, these facilities are able to be considered institutional uses in the same vein that hospitals are considered institutional uses. It is for an extended period of stay, but they're sort of akin one to the other, as opposed to somebody who's purchasing a condominium or somebody who's purchasing, I guess a condominium would likely be, or an apartment would likely be a different situation, but because it's more institutional in nature, that's why it doesn't require the servicing allotments?
Mr. Rumino?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, and we provide a brief explanation on the bottom of page 104 under the Town of Aurora official plan, where we identify that minor institutional uses are permitted within this residential designation in the OP, and we identify what minor institutional what type of uses they are: small-scale public service uses, places of worship, private schools, daycare, and residential facilities for children, nursing homes, etc. So it is considered an institutional use.
Thank you, Mr. Ramuno. And, I think we all talk about affordable housing as something that we need in our community. This is something I see very similar to affordable housing. A lot of seniors aren't able to stay in their homes. They become too difficult to maintain. And this is a way that we can keep people who are aging in place and keep them in Aurora where they've been for the last number of years.
Okay, we have Councillor Humphreys, then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the conversation because it reminded me back on that conversation that we did have. And for me, what's really important is that the aging population in town, and that this is actually a nursing home and long-term care facility, is something that's dearly needed. And in that area, which is really, really lovely, I'm looking forward to seeing this come to fruition, and I support the plan as such. This is not necessarily condos with, living quarters. It's basically a long-term care facility, and we need lots of those. We don't have those in town. We have lots of the assisted living, but they absolutely don't do this type of service, so appreciate it. Thanks.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Mr. Ramuno. Mr. Ramuno, if I'm reading the report correctly, on page 3 and elsewhere within the report, it says that there's no official plan amendment necessary because the proposed use, the retirement home and long-term care facility, conforms to our official plan. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct.
And so the reason it's before us really has to do with the zoning. And again, if I'm reading it correctly, it's currently zoned rural, and so it needs to be rezoned to institutional, in this case institutional with an exception to it. So would this not have come before us regardless of the use to rezone it from that rural to institutional, even if it had been a school or something else?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, it would.
So, similar to the comments from Councillor Perry, I certainly think this is a good location. There is a need for more retirement homes and long-term care facilities, specifically in the area. And so, what it sounds like from Mr. Maruno's answers, that part of this is a natural course, a little bit of housekeeping to ensure the zoning bylaws in place. And I think the use is certainly reasonable, so I'm supportive.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to refer to the diagram we have on page 9 of the report, the Coots draft approval plan, the subdivision. So we clustered residential use on a certain amount of acreage. Did it include the parcel of the institutional? So, for example, Block 15 is residential, and we take Block 15, Block 12, I think Block 7, and I don't know if we use Block 2, and we used all that for the total acreage to cluster and meet the density. And the institutional part on Yonge was omitted. Is that what occurred when we did the approval?
Mr. Ramuno?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, the overall draft plan, as identified on Figure 1, the outlined area also included the institutional block as well. So the Coots application was approximately 100 acres. So it included the institutional block, the Block 2, which was the lands to be retained by Mr. Coots, and that was zoned environmental protection last week by council. Block 12 is the other environmental protection block that will be conveyed to the town, and the residential areas are Block 15 over at the westerly portion, and Block 11 and Block 15 closer to Yonge Street, and those were the two blocks that were zoned by council last week. I had a report in front of council last week, but it was the entire 100-acre parcel. And so when we did our density calculation, based on that, the maximum yield was 195 units, which was approved. But it included the open space blocks and the institutional block that's before council tonight.
Okay. So now, if it was a school, there would be no residential there, and now we're going to zone it institutional, which does conform under the Planning Act. However, we're going to have a number of people living there, but they're senior residents, and they're also with care, and it's not a proper independent residential because it doesn't have kitchen facilities, as we know. So it could be, okay, and we have several of those. I'm just thinking of Park Place Manor, but there are several along those lines. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. If there's no further speakers, we'll call. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I'll just go back to the report on page 3. Under the official plan, and if you look at the official plan, this was envisioned to be, even though it has an institutional zoning, it was envisioned to be an elementary school park with the underlay of cluster residential, and that's how the density transfer occurred. It's also minor institution. Minor institution includes nursing homes and senior citizen homes, but it does not include the use here, which is retirement home and long-term care facility. I've been interested in affordable housing in Aurora since I started on council. It's something that Councillor Buck and I tried to join forces on. There's certainly no mention of this being affordable. And the second thing is, this land was never envisioned for this kind of intensive use, with or without kitchens. The OPA 34 and the $600,000 we spent at the OMB was to protect the integrity of the moraine, the functioning of the moraine, and I do not believe that this is in keeping with that or any of the planning that took place and is in place for these lands, and I'll be asking for a recorded vote next week.
There are no other speakers. I'll call a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, we'll move to item 5, and that was also brought up by Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I'll move as is.
Councillor Maracus seconds it.
Through you, perhaps, to Mr. I'm not sure if Mr. Elliott would be the appropriate person, but as of December 31st, as of the end of 2015, we had a total of 168 active projects. At this point in time, we are only recommending the closure of 49 of these projects. And I see there's some further notes on that. It concerns me that we've put money in the budget towards this for 2015, and we still have so many active projects. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Elliott.
Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is the very purpose of this report is to provide council with an update and a status of all of the capital funding that you've committed to projects in the past. And periodically, we clean these up by closing off a handful, and the project managers have asked that the remaining items that are included in attachment number 4 to this beginning on consecutive 32, these projects have all been asked to remain open, and their status is indicated in the table there as to whether they have not yet started or whether they're at the design or they've financially committed and so on. Many capital projects, road reconstructions, for example, take multiple years to complete, from design work to construction. And many of the IT projects are multiple years, and I know that every one of these projects has been looked at by the project manager, and they're asking that they remain open. It is up to council. If you wish to ask any of the directors any questions on these, that's why we're here.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. I mean, I could take a lot of time and go through them, but my main comment is it's, you know, 2/3, more than 2/3 are still open, and I'm not comfortable with that. Thanks.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Probably best direct this to Mr. Elliott, but on, I guess it's page 8 of our report, it's the first page of the capital projects funding adjustment, and specifically it's Leslie Street. So we're returning to source over $3 million. And so, you know, I know typically, you know, we get these reports on a periodical basis, but we always ask for a little bit of explanation around it. And so, you know, the brief explanation there doesn't really say why we budgeted $10 million, we've only spent 7, and we're returning 3 to source. So perhaps between now and next week, just a little bit more information on that would be great.
Do you have anything to respond to, Mr. Elliott?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have an explanation for that now, but we'll come back with a memo next week.
Great. If there are no other speakers, then I'd like to put a vote to receive this report. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, that passes, Mr. Clerk. Okay, next item is item 6, also Councillor Gardner.
Move as is.
1 second, Councillor Perry.
Again, just a comment, it's not only item 6, it's also item 14. These things are coming to us, this in particular says, for a one-year period ending December 31st, 2016. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonovskis, why are we getting this in May for a one-year contract ending at the end of this year?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. This is typical for this contract. This work actually happens in the summertime, and the contract will start once awarded, and it's usually finished by September. Council may also notice that the actual funding is below the tender value, so the scope of work for this project actually is reduced based on a unit basis to accommodate our budget.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. I don't know, just a one-year contract seems to be a misnomer on it, in my opinion. Through you to Mr. Simonovskis.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. If I could have a repeat.
Well, it just seems to me to say, for the report to say a one-year period ending December 31st. I mean, I understand what you just said, but really, it just sounds to me a little strange, to put it that way. And also, while I have you, through you, Mr. Chair, I ask this question all the time, but it seems very strange to me on the table on page 2. We did have a low bid. The second and third bids are pretty close. And then we get up to like $461,000. Are we just meant to take from that that company really doesn't want the project and high bid it?
Mr. Simonovskis?
Yes, through Mr. Chair. Yes, essentially the pricing you see is a factor of how badly the project is desired by the contractor and how they price it. There could be some competitive advantage certain contractors have based on their equipment. This project could be infill work for some contractors, whereas others it could be, sort of their bread and butter. So all those factors come into play.
Thank you.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at page 2 and 3 of the report, and there's two tables. There's table 1 that shows a bid of 191, and we are only giving 165. I just having just a bit of confusion for me to understand why we're only giving them 165. I know it's a budget item we put in, but their bid came in at 191.
Mr. Simonovskis?
Certainly through Mr. Chair. So the contract is a unit price contract, so we have a request for dollars per, say, bay of sidewalk, and we'll put in an estimate for a certain number of sidewalk bays. We set the tenders up based on a couple of factors, whether it's the volume of work we anticipate to complete for the year, also looking at our pricing from last year to see what we think is reasonable based on that pricing. Once the tender goes out in the street and we receive our pricing, if in this case, as it is, it's over budget, we will only award the contract up to our operating budget approved amount, and we'll fulfill the project. So if we ask the tender to, say, include 100 bays, but we can only afford 80 bays, and that's all we'll reconstruct for the year. And it also works the other way around. If the project was under budget, we would still recommend spending the actual money that we have in the budget, but we would actually do more bays. So if the price was only for 100 bays, but we could afford 120 bays, we would recommend proceeding to do we have more work than money at the end of the day, so we will do as much as we can based on the tender pricing that we get.
Thank you very much. And I noticed that when we do sidewalk bays, I guess that's the term for in between, some of them are grinded and some of them are replaced. Is that something that is evaluated at this time? And does the town do that? Or how does that work?
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So the work that we have for 2016 is based on inspections that were done in 2015. So the inspections will be starting shortly for this year for the program for 2017, and it's based on sidewalk condition. There's criteria within our minimum maintenance standards that defines what we need to do to address those issues. Grinding is done in-house, so when we have situations where there is a trip hazard that needs immediate attention, we do have the ability to do that grinding work in-house. The work that results in replacement of bays is usually because there's significant damage to the bay or movement that needs to be addressed, which is beyond the grinding option. So that's how we assess the work.
Thank you, Mr. Simonauskas. I had, I think 3 years ago, I had a neighbor notice that his sidewalk on his driveway, that separated his driveway, had been marked. And your staff came by and had a conversation with him, and he had wished, rather than the full bay replacement, for the town to consider grinding. And he was quite pleased that the town said, yes, we will grind this one in this case, and eliminate the trip hazard. So it's just a comment. I just wanted to.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor of receipt of the report? Opposed? That passes, Mr. Clerk. Next item is item 8, pulled by Councillor Thompson.
I'll move the recommendation. There be received for information.
Okay. Councillor Tom seconds it.
Do you have a seconder?
Yep, Councillor Tom.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Simonauskas, and my question really is around the graph on page 4 of the report, and we had a chance to speak briefly ahead of time, that, you know, anytime we use statistics to measure something, I always like to know, you know, what the relevancy is, what does it imply, and so, you know, you look at the numbers, and the comment within this chart says that shows a pretty consistent number of collisions, and yeah, I guess if you were to draw, you know, a graph and start with 2011 and end with 2015, it does look consistent, but we do have some variations between 13 and 14. I mean, it drops by 25% and essentially goes back up, and so, you know, my question really was, okay, what do these statistics tell us? Why did it drop so significantly from 2012 to 2013, and why did it increase so much from 2014 to 2015? And I'll ask Mr. Simonauskas again if he'd like to answer the question.
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through Mr. Chair. I don't have an answer for that tonight, but what I'd like to do is, this is our first annual report that I've commissioned from our department, and I'll bring that feedback back to our staff to do some detailed analysis to see what kind of information might be available to provide some insight to these variations in information, and bring that forward and use that feedback to hopefully improve our report for next year.
And so really, it's just a general comment. If we're going to measure something or use a statistic to validate something, we need to be able to answer what it is that we're actually measuring, or how we're gauging it, or what changes or circumstances happen to create that variance and stuff. And so I think it would be good to get that information back at some point, why it dropped, why it increased, or what were the factors that can cause that.
Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Simonauskas. As this is the first, my piece of advice, or maybe a suggestion, perhaps we can look at the amount of collisions per kilometer of roadway. Just a different way to look at the numbers, if I think it makes sense.
Mr. Simonauskas?
Certainly through Mr. Chair, that we can look into some alternate KPIs, and that sounds like a good suggestion.
Okay. Mayor Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would also suggest if you could overlay the population growth, because I think there would be some relevance there. It would give us a per unit number.
Councillor Gardner.
Well, I'd like to suggest that we overlay the winter weather conditions as well, but it doesn't quite make sense in this context, because the winter of 2013-14 and 2014-15, they were really bad winters. So I'm not sure why people were driving more cautiously, but that might be an interesting factor as well.
Councillor Abel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it was mentioned, but do we have an overlay of, we're talking about overlays, that's the buzz, of the locations?
Through Mr. Chair, I believe we do, because the information does come from the police in York Region, as well as the information that we have. So geographically, we would have sort of those collision intersections. This is all valuable feedback, and I would also suggest council, as it will be back to council next week, if there's any suggestions that you have in the interim, just to send me an email, because again, being our first report, we'd like to make this as valuable as we can for council.
I would then also mention pedestrians incidents, if that would be available as well.
Mr. Simonauskas? Yep, okay. Councilor Maracus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to say maybe we can add cycling also. That'd be great to know.
Okay, if there are no other comments, put to a vote. All in favor of receipt? Opposed? Okay, that passes. Okay, so we're moving on to notice of motion. Councillor Tom?
No, we've still got a couple items.
Oh, there's one more.
No, two more.
Two more. I was getting ahead of myself. Okay, we have item 9 pulled by Mr. Mayor.
I'll move as is, Mr. Chair.
Seconder. Councillor Tom seconds.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to point out, Mr. Collins from the Transportation Group was here, I guess a couple of months ago now, it seems. Time flies when you're having fun. And so staff have been looking at putting some comments together, so I would just encourage people, if they have an opportunity, there is a link to the Transportation Master Plan draft at the end of the report. It's a fairly substantial document, so it's not been printed. So if you have an opportunity to go in, have a look at it, if there's any comments, either give them to staff, or I'll be happy to take them up to the region as well. It certainly has some impact on us in terms of looking at the 404 St. John's interchange, looking at some of the regional roads as they get repaved and widened from, for instance, less E2 to 4 lanes, in some cases 4 to 6 lanes. So there's certainly some long-reaching impacts. So certainly happy to answer any questions that anybody might have, or get the answers for you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any comments? Councilor Maracus, and Gardner, and Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess maybe, Mr. Mayor, maybe you could answer this one for me. I don't know if, will that give a better explanation as far as on page 2, it mentions under the policy principles, the policy also indicates the region's intention to take a more active role in the operation of collector roads under local municipal jurisdiction. And that's all it says. So I'm wondering, is there a better explanation as far as what they'll be looking to do as far as when it comes to the municipal-owned roads?
Not at this point. That is evolving through the TMP, but they're looking at that from the perspective, through you, Mr. Chair, I apologize, as they move into more rapid transit. So as an example, Yonge Street through Aurora and through Richmond Hill are local roads as opposed to regional roads. So they're just looking at ways to ensure their long-term planning.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess through you don't have to answer this, but could it be possible also that they might be looking to helping with funding in possibly widening certain roads, local municipal roads?
Let's not get carried away.
Okay, just thought I'd throw that out there.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Abel. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. In the same, through you, Mr. Chair, in that same section, they're talking about to complete an arterial road classification study. Mr. Simonos, through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Simonos, you've looked at this and the arterial roads. I mean, could these be big? What would this mean to Aurora?
Mr. Simonauskas?
What could this mean to Aurora?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the best way to describe where the region's at with this master plan, and Mayor Dawes alluded to this, the process, these policies that they've established through consultation over the last 18 months with local municipalities and the community are really to set a new direction. once there's endorsement of the policies, then there's the groundwork of actually identifying whether it's commuter parking is one, or whether it's the links between the sort of the secondary roads, or whether it's public transit. Once they start getting into actual implementation of these policies, then there's another round of consultation. So I think the best way to describe it is, we understand that we have a role at the table, but our role and the significance of our role really won't be determined until we get to a more detailed stage of this process. And then there'll be more intense conversations around, whether that road should be part of the region's network or not, or how we're going to accommodate that, or what's our role in that particular decision. So this is really just sort of setting up the stage for those future discussions.
Through you as a follow-up. So, when this is farther along in the process, if something comes down that Aurora doesn't agree with, that we don't think is best for the community, then you have a place at the table to say that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's a double-edged sword here, because really they're looking for all of the municipalities to agree to the principles, with the understanding that there's future consultation on specifics as to how these principles are applied. But I would expect, and Mayor Dahl may have some comment being at the regional table, is that the expectation is that there's some agreement to move in that direction. Now, clearly, if there's some major impacts at the local level, that has to be discussed, and there has to be some resolution to, or amicable resolution to the outcome, and that's when we have that opportunity to stand up. And like any decision that's made, 3 or 4 years down the road, if circumstances emerge that require adjustment, the region would have to be at the table to have that conversation with us.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, and not the same thing, but in, I guess, a similar vein, number 5 on page 3, the boulevard jurisdiction. Having a single tier responsibility for roadway boulevards would be more efficient, cost-effective alternative to the status quo, and this represents a significant change to our current structure, and a full understanding of the financial implications would be required. So that policy could come down to us, and we wouldn't really have any input in the financial aspect of it.
Mr. Simonauskas.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we would, and there would be, I can tell you this particular policy position has been in discussion for 12 years at least. So it's probably another 12 years before firm decisions are made. And I know some municipalities are in support and others are not so much in support. But if you look at the operation of York Region as a system, there are efficiencies to be gained as long as the conversations through that identification of infrastructure that goes one way or the other, whether it's regional or local, is done in a respectful and mutually beneficial way. So that's the intent of the policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Simonauskas. Similar question. When I looked at number 5, boulevard jurisdiction, I'm not sure I truly understand what it's referring to, nor do I think the residents understand the jargon as well. But what is important is that it does say that, it could have a significant change to our current structure. So is it possible to give an example of this so that, we can sort of relay that to the residents of what is meant by single tier and having boulevard jurisdiction?
Mr. Simonauskas.
Certainly, and my apologies, being so deep in the details, it's clear to me, unfortunately. So Bayview Avenue is a good example, or Leslie Street. So Bayview, we have sidewalks and streetlights, as well as a bike path and the road. The road is a regional responsibility. However, they will accommodate sidewalks and streetlights, which are our responsibility. And whenever these decisions were made, that's how the division of responsibility was set. So right now, nearly all of these assets are split that way, where we're responsible for streetlights, for lighting the streets, as well as the sidewalks and or bike paths. And this policy is to look at bringing those two assets, the streetlights and the sidewalks, into the regional envelope, so that they're actually looking after the entire corridor. And it's really all of their responsibility. So then you minimize the need for sort of two-tier cooperation. They can manage the entire asset. So when they do a road reconstruction, say, they can look at the entire street. They're responsible for streetlight maintenance. So it becomes sort of all you know that it's a regional issue when it's on a regional road. And that's sort of the direction that they want to go.
So help me to understand that then if there's such efficiencies to be gained, what's some of the hesitancy, or why is it taking 12 years?
I guess the short answer to that is, we each have specialties in our services, and I guess the best way to describe it, and my perspective on this, is it really doesn't matter who owns what. Where the efficiencies are is the division between those services. So there's a belief that if they own everything, that it will be more efficient, and that may be the case. Part of the arguments in moving forward is to actually provide that financial business case to make that argument sound. I would say for the most part, though, from an operational perspective, there is very high-level cooperation between the region and local municipalities. So what those efficiencies really are, I would say, is going to be for them to present to the local municipalities. But in the end of the day, if the service levels are maintained or increased, I would be in support of a transition.
Okay. Councillor Abel, did you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. I'm looking at the policy principles, and they really do, the Boulevard jurisdiction is outstanding, but they do more or less focus on the cars, accommodating cars for corridors and grids. However, in the objectives, I think 2 or 3 of them speak to public transit or alternate ways of moving cars out of the normal commute, and so therefore we're creating bigger, faster access for roads, and we're also trying to minimize how many cars go on there. So I guess it's a 2-pronged attack at how to deal with our congestion. So I'm just sort of curious on the commitment of the Transportation Master Plan on public transit. Is it huge? Okay, because I believe it's important, and some of the things going on elsewhere in other municipalities are concentrating on grid patterns with public transit. Like we do a tour, and if we operated in grids, we'd probably be a much more efficient sort of transportation service. It might attract residents to leave their cars at home and go to the GO station, et cetera. So I am in contact with Mr. Collins and his staff on that, to follow up on that council resolution. So I didn't see it here, but Mr. Mayor, you're letting me know that that is something there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I actually have a meeting with Mr. Collins on Thursday, so I'll bring that up with him again. But you'll note on page 55 of the continuous that the objectives, the first objective is to develop a world-class transit system. So that is their first objective before changing, they've got to develop a road network and active transportation. So they're absolutely focused on providing transit. If you look at now the transit, the BRT, the bus rapid transit, is now going up and down Yonge, or the construction is for Yonge. So there's absolutely a substantial investment on the part of the region and the province, to be fair, in terms of implementing a transit system for York Region.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments? Okay. All in receipt of the York Region Transportation Master Plan? Opposed? Okay, that passes, Mr. Clerk. And we have the last item, item 10, pulled by Councillor Ton.
I'll move, Mr. Chair.
Anyone second? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a fairly lengthy item, so I won't take too much time up. Page 71 of the continuous. Top of the page, motion from former Councillor Ballard on the principles of shared space in the Aurora Promenade study area. My question is, in the response and status, it talks about how it's to be considered as a part of the official plan review. My question is that this actually seems like it's somewhat in the wheelhouse of both the cultural precinct and the parking, not necessarily the pilot project, but that area of town. And so I'm just wondering if it's possible that this report that's called for in this notice of motion can be brought back sooner than as part of the official plan review, and perhaps as a part of the reboot of the cultural precinct.
Mr. Rubino?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we certainly take a look at that, and we can have a discussion among staff and bring that back for further information when we start the consultation process on the cultural precinct.
Councillor Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Romano.
Any other comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have 3 items I wanted to address. The first one is the communications policy. It is, what page would that be? Page 5 of the report. So I've noted that parts have been stricken out. I don't agree with what's been stricken out, that action's been completed. Part of that action was advisal to the communications policy. Part of that action was to bring forward a new corporate strategic communications plan. The last one was brought to us in 2011. It's now 5 years out of date, and so there were a number of different action items included with it. I know the CAO is mentioned he'd like to speak more about it. We do have a meeting later, but for now, I'm not in favor of acknowledging that those have been achieved, because they haven't. Second one really is the strategic plan update. So through you to hopefully our CAO, it says here that we're going to strike a strategic plan steering committee. To my knowledge, we've never struck a steering committee. It's now a year later. So is there a steering committee? To the CAO.
Through you to Mr. CAO.
Where is that one? Just so I can follow along with the exact.
Sorry, it'd be the next page.
Page 6.
CAO 4.
Thank you. Okay, so, no, there hasn't been a committee established yet, but that would be one of the next steps I would look to follow through with on this old piece of business.
That's fine, but the strategic plan's been out there for a year now, and so I know we had conversations in September or October with Anthony Orello, but I've not heard anything since then. So, it's sort of still in limbo, and then we'll have a steering committee now?
Mr. CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the initial stages have started, where we're, I believe, checking with all of the department heads and measuring the progress made towards the strategic plan. And then I think the next step after that is to get a committee together and review what staff see as progress made.
Okay, and then my final one really is under IES 4. It talks about the street parking plan, and the action was that it would be brought back on May 3rd. And today being May 3rd, we don't see the report on the street parking plan, so I just was looking for an update on the date.
Mr. CAO.
To you, Mr. Chair, that's be in the next GC meeting. Yes.
Councillor Gardner.
To follow up on Councillor Thompson's comments, I think I remember reading in one of the last regional reports that the region is, I guess through you to Mr. Mayor, is behind on their strategic planning, and that's putting our strategic planning a little bit off as well. Or perhaps Mr. Ramuno knows about that. No.
Mr. Ramuno?
No, he doesn't. So I think I read that in one of the regional reports that, and really our strategic plan, sorry, are we talking about official plan? Sorry. Strategic plan. I'm thinking of official plan. My apology. The other thing I wanted to say, it's been in the news a lot, and thanks to Councillor Maracas, on page 6, we have the, I think it's on page 6, so we were talking about the door-to-door salespeople. And apparently a lot of municipalities are now sending motions down to the province and asking the province, that's page 3, sorry, at the bottom, asking the province to do something about this, in particular when it comes to door-to-door people that are selling large contracts that involve lots of money in seniors. So perhaps Councillor Maracas wants to revive this. Yeah. Anyway, he started at this council table, so good for him.
Anyone else? Okay, all those in receipt of the report? Opposed? Okay, that passes. Go into new business, and this time I'll start from my right, Councilor Maracas. Councilor Gardner?
I don't know if this qualifies under new business, but I would just like to take the opportunity to wish all the people who live in the Fort McMurray area safe escape from the fires, my children including them.
Councilor Thompson? Councilor Abel? Councilor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick one. I've trying to get some neighbors complaining about train whistles again, and I want to thank Mr. Semenauskas for sending me lots of historical information we went through, but we may start to hear more due to the C2 lands, and some neighbors are calling me saying they didn't even realize train was so near, and now with the frequency coming up every 15 minutes. So I wonder, I just wanted to state that we may need to get some investigation there in terms of what we can do. I heard that the City of Toronto and the City of Mississauga have made some alterations due to densification and impact to people in terms of hearing that all the time. So I'm going to look into what they've done and just investigate that way. That's all.
Councilor Tom? Mr. Mayor? Councilor Peary? Okay. So we have no closed session today, so I motion to adjourn. Yeah, Councilor Peary, Councilor Tom. All in favor? All opposed? Thank you.
Wow, I got off.